Good Wednesday morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Southern Oregon Weather Midweek Update. We're going to start, as usual, with our short-term outlook, and then talk about rain and snow amounts for the weekend. We're still expected to see a system move in Friday, and actually models have been trending a little bit stronger with this over the past several days. So we'll talk about how much snow that's going to bring, and then we'll talk about some long-range predictions. So first, if we look at our GOES satellite image from NOAA, there are pretty clear skies over southwest Oregon, maybe some clouds hanging around north of the Rogue-Umpqua Divide, but here in the Rogue Valley, we're pretty clear. And that lovely spring-like weather is going to continue today and tomorrow. Highs in the 60s, but still hanging on to those cool nighttime temperatures. And this is because we're going to have generally north to northwest flow. So once again, cooling off at night, but a lovely couple of days today and tomorrow. Here's our 500 millibar map. We see these orange colors, this ridge, building into Oregon. And this has really been the story for much of the winter. This split flow pattern where we have storms dropping into the Rockies, being pushed by that polar jet, and then we have this subtropical jet cutting underneath. And here in southern Oregon, we are high and dry between the two branches of the jet stream. But that pattern is going to change. Here's our system for the weekend. This is the Canadian model. And the loop here goes from Friday midday, Friday afternoon, all the way until Monday afternoon. So we have the first wave moving in late Friday, and then shifting south, and then showers continuing through the weekend. So a couple days ago, we talked about the uncertainties associated with the system. Because it's kind of an inside slider type system, it's going to drop along the coast here. And a few days ago, the models were showing that it could potentially take a more inland track and pick up less moisture. But over the past few days, the models have trended more offshore with this system, so it's going to be picking up some more moisture and depositing that moisture largely in the form of snow. Snow levels are going to be pretty low. Not expecting a big valley snow event, of course, because it's the springtime, but we could see reasonably low snow levels, maybe 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet at times, but most of the snow will fall over the higher terrain. So as far as amounts go, on the left here we see the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center's forecast. The dark blue colors here are about 1/2 inch of liquid, and the lighter blue colors here are about 1 inch, and then the purple colors are up to 2 or 2.5 inches. So that translates to about 6 or 7 inches of snow for the blue colors. Typically when we have a warmer or wetter system, snow to water ratios are on the order of 8 or 9 to 1. That means for every inch of liquid precipitation that falls, that translates to about 8 or 9 inches of snow. But this storm is pretty cool because it's going to be dropping in from the northwest, so I would expect snow to water ratios to be more on the order of 12 to 1, maybe as high as 15 to 1. So these blue colors here, the dark blue, even though that indicates only a 1/2 inch of rain, that could translate to 7, maybe to 8 inches of snow for many areas. And of course the lighter blue colors will see more. This is the WRF here on the right from the University of Washington. Once again, we've talked about how this model is sometimes a little bit too optimistic, but this is the 12-kilometer resolution, not the 4-kilometer resolution that I usually show. And this coarser resolution, if you will, doesn't pick up the terrain enhancements, especially around the Siskiyous, very well. So here for the Siskiyous, we're seeing about 6 inches of snow from Friday through, it looks like, Sunday morning, and more, 8 to 10 inches for the Southern Oregon Cascades. So that seems like a pretty reasonable forecast to me at this time, but we'll have to see how that plays out. When we look at our geopotential height maps for midweek next week, we can see these blue colors still hanging around the west coast, and in particular California. Here in the upper left-hand corner we have the Canadian model trying to bring another storm system into our area. It looks like it's going to impact mainly Northern California and Central California And in fact, the GFS is even farther south with this feature, which would mainly just bring cooler air and not much in the way of precipitation for southern Oregon. But if the Canadian solution verifies, it means that we could see our weekend system, and then we could have showers continuing for much of next week. And when we look at the ensembles support both of the deterministic models. Canadian ensemble shows these blue areas generally hanging around the southwest, this trough, and so does the American ensemble. So this is a good indication that at a minimum, once we see our weekend system move through, it's going to stay pretty cool relative to average over the next week. However, we might see some showers continuing if this trough doesn't dive too far south. So you can see that this is going to bring quite a bit of cool air. We have this ridge up in the Gulf of Alaska, and that means that a lot of cold Arctic air is going to be dropping down the backside of that ridge into the western United States. And these purple colors here, that's 6, 7, 8 degrees below average Celsius at the 5,000 foot level. So that is pretty cool relative to average. And it'll be more of a taste of winter, more of a return to February than really representative of mid-March. So the 5 to 10 day period looking to be pretty cool and maybe somewhat wet over the Pacific Northwest. Let's look at our teleconnections. Here's the PNA index, the Pacific North American index. We've talked a lot about that. When it's strongly negative, that means troughing over southern Oregon usually. We see this dip currently from the 9th to the 11th of March. That corresponds to the storm system that we will be seeing in a few days. Then we see another little dip. That's maybe indicative of showers continuing through the next week. We see a rise and then a sharp fall toward the end of March, and that means that this cooler and wetter pattern could be here to stay for a while. We also have our EPO index, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, and that's also forecast to plunge strongly negative. And once again, that means that we have that ridge over Alaska and then a lot of Arctic air spilling over the backside of that ridge into the U.S. It's just a question of where that cold air is going to go. Combined with the negative PNA pattern, this suggests that a lot of that cold air is going to come west. In particular, the Rockies, I think, are going to be hit hard by the cold air, but we will also see the effects of this negative EPO pattern here in southern Oregon. How about the AO, the Arctic Oscillation? This again is a measure of how much of that cold Arctic air is bottled up over the pole. And we see that it's forecast to be pretty strongly positive over the next week and a half, but then trending slowly toward neutral. That means that as this drops, maybe some of that cold air will become more available. But pretty strongly positive. And we also see the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, also remaining positive. Now, when you combine those two oscillations with a weak El Nino state during the wintertime, we see that's a signal for cooler than average conditions across the west coast. Technically, we are actually more of in an enso-neutral pattern right now, and that's an even stronger signal for colder than average conditions over the Pacific Northwest. This is during the winter time. I know we're moving into spring, but it's still instructive that this is a signal for, in general, cooler and wetter conditions for the Northwest. Finally, we have our MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. Areas of thunderstorms moving across the Indian Ocean from west to east have a profound impact on weather in the United States. Here's the European model. First, the MJO is hanging around in phases 6 and 7. That corresponds well to the cool and wet conditions we'll be seeing over the next few days. Then the European model takes this into the null phase, where the MJO doesn't have a lot of significance, a lot of impact in the United States. But then we see the MJO re-emerging into phases 1, 2, and 3. Now, phase 1 during March, during springtime, is a little bit warmer for the West Coast, but phases 2 and 3 are cooler again, especially for California. So this is another clue that our cooler and wetter pattern is here to stay over the next several weeks. And finally, The last teleconnection that I want to mention is really more of a correlation. Here we have our 500 millibar map. This map in the upper left-hand corner is for Monday night, March 17th, so early next week. See all these blue colors here in the Bering Sea? We have maybe 1, 2, 3 storm systems. Interestingly, weather in the Bering Sea is often correlated with weather in the western United States, and especially the Pacific Northwest. So when we see the storminess in the Bering Sea, that's an indication that in 2 to 3 weeks' time, we could see stormy weather over the northwestern United States. And in fact, that is exactly what the American ensemble, the GEFS, is showing. This is March 26th, so 14 days down the road. Here we have this trough sitting over the Pacific Northwest once again. So just another clue, another piece of evidence that this cooler and wetter pattern will be here to stay after this next weekend. But for now, we have sunny and warm conditions until Friday. Enjoy the spring weather while it lasts, and then we'll have our weekend system delivering some rain and snow showers through early next week. As far as snow totals go, I wouldn't be surprised if many areas in the Southern Oregon Cascades and Siskiyou see 6 inches plus, but we'll have to see how models trend over the next few days. We do have signs that cooler and wetter weather may continue into next week, especially the Canadian model continues those showers through Wednesday and maybe even Thursday of next week. And in the long range, our teleconnections really favor a cool and wet end to March and continuing into the beginning of April, because we have that negative PNA, we have that storminess in the Bering Sea, and we have the MJO moving into those favorable phases currently, and then returning into cooler and wetter phases later in the month. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to set your notifications for the weekend update in a few days. At that point, we'll be in a position to evaluate the storm system for the weekend and see if it matched our forecast. And don't forget to like, share this video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed the forecast.